In this Illustrator tutorial, we will draw a vector-based monster by tracing over a JPEG image. The main tools that we will be focusing on today will be the pen tool, ellipse tool, and rectangle tool. This tutorial is loosely based off of an Adobe Illustrator tutorial that I will leave a link to in the description of this video. But you can find further information about this tutorial there. This is more or less my version of the tutorial for my class. Inside of Canvas, you'll see a file to download, and this is what it'll look like when you open it. We have the original image that's on its own layer, and it's locked. If I go to my outline view, view outline, there are no vectors created. So this image that's placed in here right now is a resolution-based JPEG. So it's built up of pixels. When we are working in Illustrator, we're creating vectors, which are mathematical lines and curves and points that build up our illustration. Let's make sure that we're on the same workspace. You'll see up at the top there's a workspace switcher icon. I'm on the Essentials workspace. You can also tell it to reset Essentials to snap all your panels back into place. Back in my Layers panel, that's the second tab up here, we have, again, the original JPEG image on its own layer that will just keep locked. And there's an additional layer named Monster. I can click the arrow next to the monster, and these are all of the paths that I created for my monster shape. Every time you complete an object, it will automatically create this sublayer in your Layers panel. You can use the Layers panel to hide and show different objects. If I click on the eyeball on the monster layer, that's going to hide everything that is included in that monster layer. But I can also just hide individual objects this way too. I can kind of even run my mouse quickly to bring them all back or take them all away. So using the Layers panel gives you flexibility in being able to hide or show objects. And once you do hide an object, it kind of prevents it from being accidentally deleted or shifted. And it's easy to see in that Layers panel what you've hidden or have shown. Also, you'll see in the second column, it's blank right now. If I clicked inside there, it adds a lock icon. So that will also prevent an object from moving or being deleted. Later on in the video, you'll see me use my right click on my mouse to do some arrange commands, like bringing an object forward or backwards, or all the way to the front, or all the way to the back. But I do want to also point out that you can do that through your Layers panel. So if I wanted to take this black object of the phone shape and move it to the front, I would drag it to the top in my Layers panel, and now you can see that that is the topmost object on that layer. And as always, you can go up to the Edit menu at the top and undo any commands that you need to do over. Another command I'd like to cover quickly are the different view modes that we have available in Illustrator. Right now we are in the preview mode, which shows me my vector shapes and it shows me all of my colors that I've applied. But we can also view our document in the outline mode. Up in the View menu at the top, select Outline. And now you'll see the vectors that I created for this document. When you are in Outline view, you're not going to see any of the fill or stroke colors that have been applied. You're only going to see the vectors. It's kind of like the skeleton or the outline. Outline view can be really helpful for finding points or objects. You can see how they highlight as I hover over them, and sometimes it also makes it easier to get an exact trace on an existing path. If I go back up to View Preview, I can go back to see all of my colors and everything back again. A quick cover of how the pen tool works is P on your keyboard will take you to your pen tool. And to do a straight line paths, you'll click and release your mouse, and you've just created an anchor point. I'll go to my next spot, I can click and release. There's my second anchor point, and it's connected by a path in the middle. If you ever want to stop drawing your path because you'll see that that line is connected to my cursor, you can always hit your escape key on your keyboard, and that will end drawing that new path. Then if you want to create a curved path, you would make your initial click and release, go to the second point, and then you would click, hold your mouse key down, and drag to get that curvature. If I look at the bottom of my toolbar, I can see that there's a black fill and no stroke on this object. So the fill is the color inside, and then the stroke is the outline. I want to swap those, so I can click on this double-headed arrow above the colors in the toolbar, and now I can see there's a none applied to the fill and the black color has been applied to the stroke. If I go back to my Properties panel in the upper right corner, you'll see the Appearance panel. This is where we can also change the color of the fill and the stroke. So I can target the stroke color, click right in that colored box, and then I could choose a different color. I could also increase the stroke size, and by clicking on the word stroke, it reveals additional hidden menu options in there. So we'll be talking about variable width profiles later in the tutorial. They can be located in that stroke panel. At the top of your toolbar, you'll see that you have two different selection tools. The one on the very top, the black arrow, that's our selection tool, and that will allow us to select and modify an entire object. You'll notice when you have the selection tool selected that there will be a bounding box around the entire object, and I can use that to scale the entire object. I can rotate the entire object. I can click right on that path, and I can move the entire object around. The direct selection tool, the white arrow, allows us to pinpoint anchor points or portions of the path or object to modify. So I could click on an individual anchor point and I could move it. So this side stayed and I just moved that anchor point. I could also click on the path and adjust the curvature. You'll notice on the sides of the anchor points of the curved paths you have these direction handles. It's another way that we can adjust the curvature. We can adjust the length of it or the positioning by rotating that around. If I go back up to my outline view, we can talk about what anchor points look like when they're selected versus when they're not selected. Using my direct selection tool, I am going to click on that path, and if I look at my anchor point right now, it's white or hollow. So that individual anchor point is not selected. If I click inside of it, now it's a solid color. That anchor point is selected. So you might find that the outline view is helpful for that as well. If you want to select multiple anchor points, you can hold your Shift key down and then click on additional anchor points. Now we can set up the document. Download the file from Canvas and open up Adobe Illustrator. Then go up to File, Open. Navigate into your download folder and locate the file AI-Pen Tool. Click the Open button. And now we need to save our document. Go up to File, Save As. Navigate into your Adobe Design Suite folder and create a new folder titled Lab 13-AI-Pen Tool. Open that folder. And your file type is already probably set to an Illustrator EPS. That's what we want to save this document as. It is very similar to an AI format. It will preserve all of our Illustrator editing capabilities. EPS stands for Encapsulated Postscript File, and it's considered to be a little bit more of a universal format than an AI, which an AI is Adobe Illustrator's native format. I'll go up to the file name, and we'll want to keep that .eps file extension. I'll delete the rest of the file name and replace it with your last name, -13 AI pen tool .eps. We always want to make sure that our file extension matches our format type. Click Save. In this window, we'll just keep the version right now is set to Illustrator 2020 EPS and click OK. Up in my Layers panel, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll notice that there's already 2 layers in here. The original layer is locked, and this is actually a JPEG of this image. If I went to my outline view right now, there are no vectors created. So the image that we're looking at here is built up with pixels, not vectors. So we'll be drawing out new vectors with our pen tool today. Make sure you have your monster layer selected, and we'll go to P on your keyboard to go to our pen tool. I'll zoom in on area number 1, the teeth, and you'll see that there's number guides to help us along. So the teeth are going to be more of a basic object to create. It's all straight lines. And I'll start on point number 1, just a click and release. You'll see you have a line attached to your cursor now. Just continue to go along, click and release. And when I get back to the starting point, you'll want to see a little circle next to the pen cursor indicating you're about to close your path. If I expand the arrow next to the monster layer, you'll see that it created a new sub-layer path for this object we just created. So even though we put down all those anchor points and it created all those paths, together this is one object. If I did my outline view, now you can see the skeletons, the vectors, the paths, anchor points of that teeth. Each one of these little hollow squares there, those are anchor points. I only have one anchor point selected right now. You'll see that one's solid. I'll go back to my preview mode. That's Control Y on a PC, Command Y on a Mac, and that will toggle between outline view and preview mode. To change the color of the teeth, we can go to the Properties panel, and I can see I have a white fill right now. I could change the color of that. If I wanted to change the stroke color or size, I could do that there. There's my vectors, and we are done with the teeth. I'm going to move over to the right, part 2, draw the antenna. So on this shape, there's curved paths and corners. So we're going back to our pen tool, P on your keyboard. And the other difference about this object is that they're going to be open paths. So instead of like the teeth where we would complete the path and see that circle next to our cursor, these will be open. The end does not meet the beginning points. On your first point, I usually recommend to click and release that first point. I do have a straight path attached to my cursor right now. I'm going to hover over spot number 2, and this time I'm going to click, hold my mouse key down, and then drag. So you'll see I now have a curved path, and I have these additional directional handles that come out of each side of the anchor point. So I can make them short or long, and that changes the curvature of your path. And I can also go in any direction. So you can kind of intersect itself a little bit sometimes, so you got to be careful of that. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but it's not too bad. So I'll make this first point and I'll release my mouse. Even if it's not perfectly on that shape, that's okay. I can adjust that later. Now you can see that the line that's attached to my cursor is curved, so it thinks that I want to continue on with the curvature of this path. I'm going to click on number 3, hold my mouse key down, and then drag upward. And you'll see it kind of takes on that S shape curvature a little bit there. I'm going to release my mouse. And what it's doing right now is, if I look at my fill color, it has that gray color still applied to the fill. So it's going to try to start building this object with you. If it bothers you, and it kind of does bother me, you can always go into your fill and apply none to the fill color. I'll just click up here to get rid of that menu, and it makes it a little bit easier to draw. And you can always add a fill color later if you want to. If you ever want to stop drawing with your pen tool and it's stuck to your cursor and you can't get out, You can always hit your escape key on your keyboard, and that releases you from the pen tool. So now I still have this path I was creating selected, but I need to readjoin my pen tool with that path to keep drawing. So if I hover over that last anchor point until I see that slash show up next to my cursor, I can click on it, and then you'll see you've readjoined your path, and you can continue on with drawing. So this curve, because I had reset, it's not working out quite as well as the other ones. So I can go back and I can fix this corner angle here after I'm done. For now, I'll go up to number 5, and then when I get to number 6, I'll click and release, and I'm done drawing my path. So I can hit my escape key on my keyboard. Now if I want to edit my path, I would want to go up to my white arrow, the direct selection tool. A on your keyboard will take you there. And if I look at my shape right now, I'll do a Command or Control Y to go to my outline view. So while I have this whole entire object selected, I really only have one single anchor point selected, that last anchor point that I created. So I'm going back to my preview mode, and I want to adjust this path right here. So if I click right on that path and I drag it up a little bit, you'll see that those direction handles are automatically moving around with me. So I could take that new direction handle and also adjust that curvature individually. And I'll do the same right here. I can also move the anchor point and maybe adjust this last path just a little bit here. I'll go back up to my properties panel, and a fun thing that you can do in Illustrator to an open path is change the variable width of your stroke. I'm going to click on the word stroke to open up my stroke panel, and at the very bottom you'll see profile. Right now it's set to uniform, which is a solid line. If I change that to any of these other options, you can see how now in this example I chose, it's thinner at the beginning and the end, and then it gets thicker. So you can try a different width and some of the different width profile options. And I can also change the end points of the path. They're also called arrowheads. So you have two separate boxes here to choose from. One's going to be the start of the path, the other is going to be the end. So you've got your traditional arrows, and if I scroll down, I've got some other shapes in there too, little scissors and pointers. I think I'll take the circle. So that's actually on the wrong side of the path. I'll bring that back up to none, and then maybe try it on the right one. And I can scale it down. Once you choose an arrowhead, you'll see these scale percentage boxes show up, and you can change the alignment of the arrow tips. So right now I'm at the end of the path. before I'm kind of overlapping the end of that path. Click out. I'll go back up to my layers to show the original layer again. And then I'm going back up to my main selection tool, V as in Victor on your keyboard. Now I have the entire object selected, not just individual anchor points anymore. So whenever you see this full bounding box appear around an object, that's when you know you have the entire object selected. One way that we can transform or duplicate an object is by selecting it with our selection tool and then going up to the Object menu, Transform, Transform Each. Make sure that you have your preview box checked. And we are going to move this antenna over to the right side, flip it, and duplicate it. So we'll start with the move. We just want to move it on the horizontal slider. And then we'll check the box that says Reflect X. Reflect on the X-axis. The Transform Each dialog box is a convenient way to be able to scale and move, and rotate, reflect, and transform your object doing multiple commands in one step. And it also allows you to make those transformations and click the copy button. So if I were to hit OK right now, it would have completely transformed the original object. But I'm going to hit the copy button, and that kept the original object and then also copied the duplication. Save your document. Okay, part 3, create the mouth. So this object has a combination of curved paths and one straight path at the bottom. Let's go back to our pen tool, P. And I'm going up to my properties panel again, but before I do, I just want to point out that under the monster layer now, we have only made 3 paths. We have the mouth and then the 2 antennae. And all of those are still on the monster layer. So if I click that arrow, you can see I still have 2 main layers, but we've been drawing paths on the monster layer. I'll go back to my properties panel. So it kept my same color formatting options that I had before. I have none applied in the fill box, and I have a black stroke. I can change the color of that and bring down the stroke point size a little bit. Okay, now I'll start at point 1, click and release, move on to 2, and this one I'll click, hold my mouse key down, and then drag. For straight paths, you click and release. For curved paths, you click and hold that mouse key down. That's the difference there. So as I'm going down to the 3rd location, I can see already that the curvature isn't in sync with the tracing behind it. So what I need to do is reset this last anchor point on number 2. And it will convert it from being a curved path to a straight path. So when I hover over number 2 anchor point, I can see I have a little arrow that shows up next to my cursor. I'm going to click and release once. Now I have a straight path, and it gives me a fresh start on this next curved path. So I can just kind of drag that around a little bit. And I can go back up when I complete this shape, and I can also readjust it. Now my direction handles aren't lining up with the trace behind it, and that's okay. It's meant to be a guide, but it's fine if it's not perfectly on there. So now from points 3 to 4, this is a straight path. So I have to go back to my last anchor point, wait till I see that arrow appear, click once and release. Now I have a straight path. We'll go to 4, click and release. I'll zoom out just a touch here. And now when I go to number 5, I'm going to click, hold my mouse down, and then drag. Okay, and then from points 5 back to the beginning, I can tell that that would not be a correct curvature. I'll reset that last anchor point. Hover over the starting anchor point until I see the circle appear next to my cursor, indicating I'm about to complete the path. And then I can hold my mouse and drag it where I want it. So right now I just have a stroke and no fill. I can go into my fill color and fill that entire object. Save your document. And now we can start building our monster. I still have my mouth selected, so I'm going to bring that over to this picture. I can see it needs scaled down. If I go to a corner anchor point and I can drag that around. And to be able to place the teeth, I could hide the mouth. I'll grab the teeth and drag that down on top of my monster. Scale it down. You can just grab those anchor points. Shift if you don't want to distort your shape. Now I can bring the mouth back, and I can see that the mouth shape is in front of the teeth. So they're both there. If I go to my outline view, you can see them both. But we need to change the arrangement. I'll click the mouth, right click, and go to Arrange, Send to Back. And now you can see in your Layers panel, the mouth is all the way at the bottom of that layer stacking arrangement. And now you can start to build the antenna. Scale it down. That's how my vectors look so far. I'll zoom back in. And I can start tracing the shape of the monster. I'll go back to my pen tool. Just pick a corner. First click should be a click and release. And then the second, you can drag and hold. And you can color your monster however you'd like. I need to arrange, send to back, and I can hide it. Control 3 to hide on a PC, Command 3 on a Mac. I can go back to my ellipse tool and create the eye. I'll move back to my selection tool. Right click on this white part of the eyeball and send backwards. I'll bring back the shape of the monster. I can hide the original layer, and that's how my monster looks right now. I'll save and bring that original layer back again. If you want to get into more detail, that's terrific. I would like to show you how to work on corner points with the rectangle tool. I'll draw open a simple rectangle, and you'll see that you have this circle near the corners of the rectangle. And as I click and drag that inward, it just rounded all 4 corners of that shape. I'll go back to my stroke and apply none, and I'll give it the black fill color. I'm going to duplicate this shape by copying it and pasting it in place, and we'll make it a little bit smaller. Go to your selection tool, V on your keyboard, copy your object, and you could also hide it. Control 3 on a PC, Command 3 on a Mac, and I'll paste the new object in front of that. Holding the Shift key down, I'm going to scale. And And for this interior screen, I don't need rounded corners. So to take rounded corners off, I can go back to that corner circle and drag that out. And I'll change the fill color. Go to my layers, bring back that larger part of the phone rectangle. And I want to select both this rectangle screen and the phone shape. So if I hold my Shift key down, I can select both of those objects and arrange send to back. Save your document. You can add the circle home button. I'll change the color. My outline view. Those are all the vectors I've drawn today. And again, if you'd like to go into more detail, that'd be great. Just continue to hide your layers, and then you can see underneath it. Save your document. If you'd like to create some of the background shapes, you can. I also did some of the little accent marks that were on the original illustration, and really it was basically just 2 anchor points that I added a variable width profile in the stroke panel. And I did that for the eyebrow and the hair and some of the reflections around the eye and the mouth. Remember to adjust your arrangements either through the layers panel or by clicking on the object, arrange. When you're finished with your illustration, we can adjust the artboard. I will click the eyeball next to the original layer to hide it, and then I'll go to my artboard tool. Shift plus O on your keyboard will take you there. Now I see a bounding box around my entire artboard. I'll go to the upper left hand corner and resize the artboard closer to the image size. And I'll just go back to my selection tool and save the document. Now we can export as a PNG file to use for different purposes. We can go up to the File menu, Export, Save for Web Legacy. And you shouldn't see the original image in this preview. I'll go to where it says JPEG on my screen, and we'll change that to PNG 8. Make sure that you have the transparency box checked so we won't have a solid white background behind the graphic, and click the Save button. Navigate back into your Adobe Design Suite folder, into folder Lab 13 AI-Pen Tool. I'll keep the name of the document the same, and now I can see it has the file extension .png. Click Save. Now if I went up to File, Open, navigated back into folder Lab 13 AI-Pen Tool, I can locate the PNG file that we just exported. And now, if I were to go to my outline view, there are no vectors, so it was not able to preserve the vectors for the PNG file, but if I were to place it into, let's say, Photoshop or InDesign, it would have that nice transparent edge to it. So to recap, what we did in this tutorial was we used the pen tool to trace over the teeth using straight edge paths, and then we created the antennas using curved paths. The antenna is also an open path where the end does not meet the beginning, versus the teeth, which is a closed path. And then we created the shape of the mouth using a combination of straight and curved paths. We then created the curved paths of the mouth by alternating and resetting that last anchor point to reset the curvature. Then we compiled all of those objects together, worked on our arrangement commands, hiding and showing, and added in the other elements to the design, adjusted the corner points of our rectangle to make rounded corners, and then we exported a file as a PNG. So the EPS and the PNG file will need to be zipped, compressed together, and that is what will be submitted into Canvas. Thank you for watching.